Hi everyone, this is Jamie and welcome to another episode of the Yogi Within Podcast. Okay, on today's episode, I'm going to talk about strength training or specifically how to build strength. Now, on a lot of recent episodes, I've gone into more philosophical aspects of yoga, Ashtanga yoga, and we could say a little bit more of some of the deeper aspects of yoga practice, which I think are more important. But today I'm going to talk specifically just about, really kind of superficial side of it, really, of what we're doing in the yoga room and, how we're building strength, yeah? More often than not, I would say I meet practitioners who struggle with how to build strength. Yeah, they really struggle with what we're looking to do to, build muscle and to create that resistance that we're getting stronger in our yoga practice. And I'm going to relate this specifically to Ashtanga yoga. In my opinion, Ashtanga yoga really is a balanced practice in that sense that it focuses on strength as much as flexibility. And if you're working through the system in the correct way, at some point you will definitely have to work on your strength to balance out the flexibility in your yoga practice. So more often than not, I will meet practitioners who struggle with the strength side. The flexibility side, I would say, that just really develops over time. Some people are obviously a lot more stiffer than others. Some people are obviously more hypermobile and they might find some movements easier from a flexibility perspective. But I would say that most practitioners I meet who really struggle with aspects of Ashtanga yoga, for example, is they really struggle with the strength element and they seem to reach a kind of plateau, or they build a certain amount of strength and then they kind of stop and then they plateau there for a long time. There's a kind of a limit they might reach within their practice. So what I'm going to talk about today is why we reach those limits within our strength capabilities and what we can do to increase that, what we can do to actually make our body stronger so we can do more of these lifting and pressing exercises that are more necessary to work yourself through the Ashtanga system, especially postures such as Karandavasana, for example, in intermediate series. And if you get into third series, the arm balance sequence in third series, which is it's pretty savage, actually. I would say it's very hard work. But if you're working correctly in your vinyasas and you're learning how to lift up and jump back correctly in primary series, I did a whole episode just on that. If you want to go and check out my episodes on Bandha and primary series. In my opinion, this is a very important part of learning the Ashtanga yoga system, and this should be incorporated into your practice in primary series. Yeah, you should have learned how to lift up and jump back by the end of primary series, or at least made a very concerted effort on how to do this, so you're making that strong connection to your lower abdominal muscles and your deep spinal muscles. This is very important, especially when you go into other movements like deep back bends, that you have that connection to your core in that way. So go and check out my episodes on Bandha and primary series, and also my episode on intermediate series. So as I said, I meet a lot of practitioners who I don't think people really struggle with the flexibility side as much, I would say. Even stiff practitioners, once we start moving and we start breathing correctly, we can kind of see that there's a clear path. Yeah, we're like, okay, with consistency, I can see that this flexibility will just start to come, especially in primary series as the hamstrings get longer and we start to lengthen those muscles. I would say that most practitioners can see that there's a path forward and that we're able to progress. Some other movements are a little bit more complex. This can be a little bit more challenging, for example, Kapotasana and things like that, these deeper back bends. But what I mostly experience, like I say, is people that really struggle understanding how to build strength. I think after, a year or two of practice, a lot of practitioners will understand like how I'm going to get flexible. They understand that process a little bit, that with consistency, and if you just keep kind of chipping away, at some point it will kind of catch up. And, with the right sleeping patterns, eating patterns, our bodies adapt. We have less tension in the body, less inflammation, and the body starts to open in a holistic way. Yeah. But with the strength side, like I say, it's just quite common. I meet practitioners that plateau, and they build a certain amount of strength in their practice, but they kind of seem to plateau. And I think it's that some of us don't know like how to build strength. We don't know what that feeling is like. Yeah, we don't know what it feels like to go to failure. Yeah, I cover this a lot in my jump back workshops, for example. I specifically do workshops just on the lift up and jump back, just because it's so hard. Yeah, I mean, before I came to Ashtanga yoga, I'd done a myriad of different sports, and I would have thought of myself as relatively strong. But once I started to lift up and jump back, I was like, my God, this is so hard. It's such a difficult movement, especially in the beginning. Lifting your body weight up off the floor in that way. I did the usual. My mat's too narrow, my arms are too short, my legs are too long. You go through this way of explaining it to yourself of why this is so difficult. But really, I had very weak hip flexors, which is strange because a lot of us come to Ashtanga yoga, for example, who've done other sports, and we might think that our abdominal muscles and our hip flexors are strong. This is a conversation I have from time to time, but they are the superficial muscles. What Ashtanga yoga does, and specifically the lift up and jump back, it really targets those deep spinal muscles, the psoas, and those deep hip flexors that you need to be strong to be able to lift up and keep that tight shape in your lift up and jump back. So there's different feelings in life of being strong, and I've done lots of different sports prior to yoga that gave me the feeling of being strong. But it's a different type of strength. When I was a young man, I started off doing weightlifting and things like that. That was fun, learning how to lift weights, and that taught me actually quite a good foundation of how to build strength. I was taught how to do powerlifting when I was a teenager by my father's uncle, Henry, and that gave me a bit of a foundation of building strength as I was growing up as a teenager. So as I was developing as a teenager, that gave me a good foundation with strength exercises. But later on, doing other sports, for example, rock climbing is a good example. That's a very different type of strength. Yeah, it's very pulling. You could say more of an isometric kind of strength where we're holding positions, and there's lots of pulling muscles that are being involved in this, and we're pulling our body weight. Yeah. So let's break down some differences in strength training. If you go to the gym and you lift a weight, this is a certain type of strength that you're developing. This isn't body weight exercise. You're lifting up an external object and you're creating tension in your body to do so. Yeah, we do this naturally as humans. Yeah, when you go, let's say for example, you're moving home and you go to pick up something off the floor. Naturally, when you start to lift that object, you will naturally hold your breath. Yeah, this is called the Valsalva maneuver. It's very natural. You hold your breath, and what this does, increases the muscular tension through your whole body, but especially around the core of your body. So when you do this and you create this compressed energy, you hold your breath, and what it does is it increases the blood pressure in your body, and it enables you to generate more force to lift something up. This is correct. Yeah, this is a correct technique if you're trying to lift up a heavy object off the floor. The negative sides to this is that you're increasing your blood pressure quite a lot actually, and it's not that uncommon for heavy power lifters and things like that to potentially burst blood vessels. I'm not saying it's common, it does happen. And what we don't want to do in our body is actually increase our blood pressure. We actually want to try to reduce our blood pressure. So in yoga, for example, we don't hold our breath. Yeah, you'll probably hear your teacher often say this to you, is don't hold your breath during movements. Now, this is quite difficult to do this when you're performing a strength exercise. A good example is when I teach handstands. Beginners will often hold their breath when they kick up and come into an inverted position when they're in a handstand. This is incorrect, but it's a natural response. Unfortunately, our natural responses are not always the correct one, so we have to train that, yeah? So in the beginning, handstands will feel like a strength exercise. Handstands are not a strength exercise, they're a balance exercise. You can't hold your breath and balance correctly. You need to be able to breathe smoothly to be able to balance. This is intrinsic with body movements. You want the breath to flow with the movement. This means that your body is at ease. You're calm, you're relaxed, and you're oxygenating your body. So that means you can stay there for longer. If you held your breath in a handstand, you wouldn't be able to hold it very long, and you're just going to increase the blood pressure in your body. So in yoga, we want to be able to breathe through movements. We don't want to hold our breath like we would do in weightlifting, doing the Valsalva maneuver. This will increase blood pressure. It will increase the tension in your body to get the movement done. But I would say it's not the most efficient way to move, especially when you're doing body weight exercises like we do in yoga or calisthenics. Calisthenics is basically body weight exercises. Quite often you see guys at the gym, doing body weight exercises. Calisthenics has become a very popular way of training these days. I would say it's actually very good. It's very good for you to be able to move your own body weight. It's very, I don't want to use the word functional because that word gets kind of thrown around in a certain way in body movement circles, but it's good, yeah? Being strong feels good, yeah? Being flexible feels good, but it's really good to feel strong. Yeah, it's a nice feeling in the body. It gives you confidence. It's nice to be able to feel you can do things with your body. You can lift things up, you can move things. It gives you confidence to feel strong in your body, yeah? So yeah, in yoga, we're looking to breathe through the movement. We're not looking to do forced exhalations. The Valsalva maneuver is a forced exhalation, yeah? When we do forced exhalations, we stop breathing, yeah? The diaphragm closes. We're not able to continue breathing through movements. And like I say, in yoga, we want to be able to breathe through movements. There can be times when this changes. And I think this is what happens to yoga practitioners when they struggle with this. When you're lifting a heavy weight, for example, if you're doing a heavy squat, you will breathe out like that. Yeah, this is a very common technique to push your breath out in a short, forced exhalation to generate pressure to move an object. Yeah. In yoga, we want to do nice, fluid breaths. When something has adapted fully in our nervous system and we can do it with more ease, this will be the case. Sometimes when we're learning a movement, it's necessary to create this forced exhalation just to get the body going, yeah? I will actually advocate this when you are learning some body movements. If you've never experienced this before, this could be why you're plateauing, yeah? We're expected to do things in a kind of smooth, transitional way in yoga, and we're expecting to move in this fluid way where our breath is smooth. This might not be the case yet. You might have to build up to that. And to build up to that, you have to get into this forced energy, yeah? There's a certain type of energy you need to do a strong movement, yeah? I talk to this sometimes with some of my students when they're learning drop backs and they're learning some other movements that you could say need a little bit more explosivity. Yoga generally doesn't have very much explosivity. It's mostly kind of more isometric holds. What I mean by that is where we're holding a fixed position for some time. We don't really do too many explosive movements. I would say the jump back and the jump through is an explosive movement. It should be more of an explosive movement to generate that necessary energy to lift up and jump back. If you're not used to doing that, this is something that you might need to try to incorporate into your yoga practice so you're able to generate more force. Let's just break down the word force momentarily, yeah? If any of you have studied basic physics at school, you would have understood Newton's laws of motion. These are basic physics principles in our world and potentially in our universe. Yeah, gravity is a thing. Gravity is, pushing us down into the earth somewhat. Yeah. When we're doing calisthenics or body weight exercises or yoga, we're learning how to push down into the floor. Yeah. It doesn't matter how strong your hip flexors are or how strong your core is. If you don't know how to push down into the floor to generate enough force to lift your body off the floor, you won't be able to push up from a jump back, for example, or press into a handstand. You really need to learn how to push energy down into the floor. Newton's second laws of motion: for every amount of energy you push down into the floor, the earth will reciprocate and give you the same amount of energy back. This is a beautiful thing, yeah? Gravity initially feels like it's not on your side. When you go to lift up and jump back and you feel like a dead weight, you can feel like gravity is fighting you. When you learn how to push your energy down into the floor with enough force, the earth will give you that same energy back and your body will feel lighter. This isn't a super important thing to understand about body weight exercises. This is very different to pulling. For example, when I was doing rock climbing, I'm using my musculature to pull my body up. Yeah. With calisthenics and yoga, we're learning how to push our energy down into the floor. This is a very important thing to understand. When you press your hands down into the floor on your yoga mat, you're exerting a certain amount of force into the floor. As you get stronger, you will be able to push more energy down into the floor. The more energy you push down, the more energy the earth gives you back. As you get stronger, as you exert more force, your body is very smart, yeah? Your body is a beautifully smart organism. You have to ask your body for more strength, yeah? You have to request it, yeah? The way you request more strength is by going to failure. What I mean by that is going to the point where you can't push anymore and you almost fall down. Just to conceptualize this with something else you might understand, if I was at the gym and I was doing a squat and I had a certain amount of weight on the barbell, a lot of you will know what it is to spot someone at the gym. What that means is that someone will stand behind you and give you a little bit of help at the point where you come to failure. So let's say you do a deep squat, you're pushing up, you get halfway, you're at your maximum amount of strength, someone will touch the bar lightly to elevate you back up. This is called spotting someone. Now, what that person is doing who's gone to failure in that squat, they've gone to the point where they've reached their maximum strength threshold. When you reach that maximum point, that's your body telling you, we don't have enough muscle fibers to push anymore. So you've reached your limit. This is okay. When you reach that limit, each time you do that, but you continue trying to press, this sends a neurological system from your brain and your nervous system and your muscles to ask for more muscle fibers. You're requesting your body to give you more strength. It's a fascinating thing, yeah? Go to failure, get to that point where you can't push anymore, you've totally exerted yourself. The next time you do it, you will be stronger. Yeah, your body will understand that we need to do something here. You're asking us to give more muscle fibers so that we can exert more force. This is how we get stronger in the body, yeah? If you're not used to doing this, this can feel a little bit alien, which is why I see a lot of yoga practitioners plateau, because they're not going to failure. You know, when we go to yoga class, you know, we want this kind of nice flowy energy, but you know, when you're building strength, you have to go to failure. You have to go to that point where you can't push anymore, yeah? When you're learning postures like Karandavasana, lifting up and jump back, or maybe some controlled jumps in Bakasana and things like that. This is what we're doing there, yeah? When you see people floating in the air and they look like they're defying gravity, in a way they are. They've built up enough core strength and they're able to push enough energy down into the floor that they're able to hold themselves in space. This is exceptionally important if you're learning the jump back and the jump through, which is why I do workshops specifically on the jump back and jump through. It can be quite difficult to teach in a class, even in a Mysore room. It requires much more attention to detail. It's also why I did an online course for this. I see so many people struggle with the lift up and jump back. And so many people have asked me for different drills and different techniques on how to build strength. So if you want to check that out, it's called the Jump Back Breakdown. Go onto my website, jamiehendersonyoga.com. You can check it out there. I've been working on that course for many years. It really works. I know how difficult it is. It's really difficult to do the jump back and jump through. And to understand these principles, this is really important to understand. You can learn all the techniques in the world, but if you don't understand this methodology of how to push and press and generate that amount of force into the floor, you will just always plateau, yeah? So again, think about the person at the gym squatting a weight and someone gives them a spot and gives them that tiny bit of help that enables them to go beyond their maximum strength limit so that their muscle fibers get denser and thicker and they're able to push more force. The more force you can push down into the floor, reciprocally, the earth will give you this back, and then you'll feel like earth is on your side, gravity's a little bit on your side, and you will start to feel lighter. You will start to feel lightness in your body. Lightness comes from strength, yeah? When we see advanced yoga practitioners do lovely floaty movements, it's because they're very strong, yeah? It might not look it superficially, and yoga's quite different like that from other modalities. There's much deeper muscles in the body. Often you won't see six-pack muscles and things like this and, overly ripped bodies in yoga practitioners because they're working with the much deepest muscles in the body and bandha. This is a very different type of training rather than overly contracting muscles so that they look bigger. This is a completely different type of training. It's not superficial that way. In yoga, we want very strong muscles, but we also want those muscles to be very long and soft. This is why the body feels so good when we do yoga, because our muscles are strong, long, and soft touch, which is what we want. Blood and oxygen flows freely, and they're very strong. Your bones are strong, your tendons and ligaments are strong. They're less likely to damage. And it's not blocked energy, yeah? Everything's moving. The same with the breath. We want everything flowing and moving. This is very different to doing weight training and, trying to build muscle mass where the muscles become overly contracted and short. This is not what we want for health, in my opinion. We want nice, long, soft, strong muscles. So we need to understand that, yeah? Now, another aspect to this is weight. So when we're dealing with physics and we're dealing with the laws of the universe potentially, we need to understand how weight affects this. Quite often when I go to different movement practices and training practices, quite often you'll see the guys that are really good at, or girls actually, that are very good at calisthenics, they're usually quite small. I meet a lot of short guys who are smaller, who are compact in that way, who have that kind of body shape. They seem to do very well at these pressing and lifting postures because their mass is smaller, yeah? They tend to have slightly smaller bodies, the guys that I see that do a lot of the kind of crazy advanced stuff. It's harder to do that with a bigger body, yeah? You don't really see big, huge guys doing floaty calisthenics, and it's just from a body weight perspective, yeah? The more weight you have, the more energy you have to push down into the earth to generate more force. So if you're lighter, but you're also very strong, it's basic physics, yeah? It's a power to weight ratio thing. So if you're lighter and you're strong, body weight exercises will be easier. So it's something to think about when we understand some of the natural limitations of our body type. And it doesn't mean you can't do these things. It's just interesting to observe and know the differences. I would say in my body, I'm somewhere in between. I'm not really super big, I'm not really super small, but I have quite thick bones. My legs are quite thick and big, so I'm not a small person. So I had to work really hard actually to develop the necessary strength to lift up and jump back. It didn't come easy for me. I had to work very diligently on this to generate the right amount of strength and to be able to use my breath in the correct way. And once you get really into this and you understand pressing and lifting, you will focus on your breathing a lot. The breath will actually carry you through these movements once you've developed the right amount of stress and pressing power. And that's what we're doing. We're stressing our bones, we're stressing our tendons and ligaments to recruit more muscle fibers so we get stronger. This is a very good thing in the body. We want strong body, yeah? As we get older especially, strength training will actually become, I would say, a little bit more important. Let's just go back to breathing a little bit. A good example of this, for example, I was learning Karandavasana, where you come into a Pincha Mayurasana, so forearm stand, lotus, you come down and go back up. It's a very difficult strength exercise, I would say it's one of the hardest strength movements potentially in Ashtanga Yoga. It's very difficult. There's no room you can't really cheat, it's just you're in this very fixed position and you just have to use a lot of brute force. There's nothing really pretty about it in that way. You just have to exert a lot of force to lift your body back up. Similar to the jump back and jump through, but I would say it's much harder. And the way you use your breath in this position, I would say when you're learning this is what I'm talking about with plateaus, is you have to get into a sort of masculine energy with this. For example, if I was about to do a heavy squat, I would breathe out during that movement. I would exert a lot of force. When I was learning Karandavasana, I would do this in the beginning. As I was pressing up, maybe 4 or 5 times, you would hear me going as a way to generate force. This isn't ideal. This isn't an ideal way to do the movement with, one inhalation, one exhalation. But when you're learning these movements, you have to get into this kind of psychology of, I'm going to do this today. Yeah, it's a masculine energy. Yeah, it's quite a confident feeling you need to exert where you tell yourself, I'm doing this today, and you get into a kind of, masculine sort of energy. Yeah. Most movements in yoga are not like this, Most movements in yoga are softer and smoother. And actually, when we're stretching and going into deep movements, we don't want that kind of energy. That's usually where things tend to break or tear. We don't want that kind of energy. But in some movements in yoga, we need that masculine push. We need that force, That kind of, almost, we could say testosterone, We need that kind of energy to push, confidence, and really trying, like maximum effort. So with some movements in yoga, you need maximum effort. You need that kind of headspace to generate force like that. So when you're learning movements like this and you feel like you're plateau, you need to breathe out quite forcefully to generate that energy temporarily. Once that strength has become more linear and more embodied, you won't have to breathe like that. It will be much smoother and much more flowy. For example, when you lift up and jump back, you lift up on an inhale, and there's a moment there where you pause and then you jump back. So there is a moment where you hold your breath, but this is very temporary. So again, in yoga, we're trying not to hold our breath. We're trying to breathe fully and smoothly through the movement. But I would say when you're learning movements, get into that headspace of really pushing, generate that force. When you do a forced exhale like that, you will really create a lot of bodily tension that you'll kind of generate more force. And again, once that becomes more embodied, it can become smoother and easier. So with strength work, we've always got to think about this in progressions. How do we progress into these movements so that we're not plateauing? We actually feel like we're building strength and we're getting stronger every week or every month. And that's, really you can build strength like that, yeah? Flexibility is very different. It comes and goes a bit depending on sleep, stress, water intake. Flexibility is a little bit more up and down. I would say strength work is much more linear. As you're building strength, it kind of goes up in a kind of steady arc as you're building strength. And actually, once you've built a certain amount of strength, it stays there and you're able to maintain it. So you just have to get there. Yeah, you have to get through that block so that you're building strength and generating more force. So it's just good to understand what we're doing in the yoga room, what we're doing with body weight exercises, and what we're doing to generate that force, whether it's the legs or the arms or whatever it is. It's this pressing down energy. Go and check out my podcast on Bandha. This is a very important thing to understand. Whichever body part is on the floor, whether it's your hands, your feet, these should always be pressing down strongly. In every posture, pressing down to generate lift. So you have these two opposing forces, yeah? And in the middle of that is Bandha. Go check out my episode on Bandha. Another aspect to this that can help is just believing that you can do it. Often what I see with practitioners who are plateauing is because they feel they can't, yeah? They've reached some psychological barrier for some reason and they actually tell themselves they can't do a movement before they do it. This is incorrect. It's also a lie. Don't lie to yourself. You have to believe you can do things, yeah? You'll be amazed how much believing you can do something will change the outcome of doing it. A good example, I'm going to go back to Karandavasana on this just because it's a very good example. The first time I came up from Karandavasana, I wasn't any stronger that day than another day, but I believed I could do it. I told myself that day, I'm doing this today, I'm coming up today, and I had a certain energetic shift in my body, and I did. It happened that day, and I believed I could, yeah? You'll be amazed how much not believing in yourself, this is true for most things in life, limits how well you can do something. You have to believe in yourself, yeah? Give yourself confidence, believe that you can do it, tell yourself you can do it. The moment before you try, tell yourself you're able to do this. You'll be amazed how much of a difference that makes with strength work. Yeah, it's a big one. Very often I'll meet practitioners mostly are being limited by their mind. Negative attitudes towards themselves and what they're capable of. Believe in yourself, yeah? I'm saying, and it's not out of just, it's true. I'm not lying to you. Most things you can do, most things people can do if they believe that they can do it. A lot of us get caught in these negative loops where we stop trying, or a momentary pause that stops us from doing something. Just try your best. Try your best every time, and you will build strength and believe in yourself that you can do it. One other aspect, this would be recovery. Yeah. Now, in yoga, I would say we don't want to work maximum strength all the time. You will just exhaust yourself, yeah? And again, if you're holding your breath a lot doing strength work, you'll really exhaust yourself. You have to breathe through movements. The less you breathe, so the slower you breathe, the more oxygen you get into your body. This is called the Bohr effect. The more carbon dioxide you're bringing into your body actually oxygenates your cells. The more oxygen you bring into your cells, the more energy you have. This is why most times when you finish your yoga practice, you should feel refreshed, not exhausted. If I went and done an extreme cardiovascular sport, for example, where I'm hyperventilating, I would be exhausted afterwards. In yoga, we breathe less, so we hypoventilate, we breathe slower. This oxygenates our body, our cells, so we feel more energized. And actually, the slower you breathe, the stronger you are. Yes, it's an important thing to understand. You actually get stronger from breathing slower. Now, I said, this is a bit counterintuitive to what I said. Initially, when you're learning something, a very powerful move, you might have to force that breath a little bit to get the movement going. But eventually, you want that breath to be slow and long. Oxygenate your cells, you will have more strength, you'll recover faster, and you will feel more relaxed during the movement, and your blood pressure will be lower. All of the nice health benefits that we expect from our yoga practice. Recovery is important, yeah? If you are going to failure with your strength work in your yoga practice, you can't do this every day. Like I say, I wouldn't recommend that anyway. In my jump back breakdown course, I go over a whole segment on this, on how to incorporate strength work into your yoga practice, because it's a little bit different for everyone. We can't go flat out every time going to failure. You'll exhaust yourself. You have to pick your moments where you can kind of work on that strength like to your maximum, then back off and increase that a little bit each day as you go along. If you're just blowing through your yoga practice and going to failure on every movement, you'll be exhausted and you probably will injure yourself. So I don't recommend that. Go and check out my jump back breakdown for a bit more details on how you can incorporate that into your yoga practice. But recovery is important, yeah? If you go pretty deep one day, this is the same with flexibility, the next day you will need to back off a bit, yeah? You can't go hard every day. You shouldn't go hard every day. I would say for most people in the yoga practice, you want to find that like 85% range, you know, where you've got a nice amount of effort, but you're not going too hard and you're consistent over time. This works the best. Not going super hard every day, but some days you need to. Like I say, some movements, I'm going to use Karatavasana for example again, or some of the arm balances I learned in third series. You know, you have to just go to your maximum push. Especially some of the arm balances in third series, for example, you know, you're doing this bent arm strength. You have to really go to failure to build that strength. And that can be quite exhausting, but, you know, it's part of the learning process. The body will adapt, the muscles will adapt, and then that will become easier and you won't have to work so hard. Again, that's another thing to remember with strength work. It's not always going to be that hard. You just have to go through a period where, you know, you fatigue your muscles, you create that density, you recruit those muscle fibers, and then after that it will be normalized and it will be an easier movement, yeah? It just takes a bit of time and a bit of effort. I think lastly, it's just understanding this explosiveness. Again, in yoga, there isn't very much explosive movements, and most of them aren't. Most of them are very controlled movements, but some movements are explosive. Some things we have to do with a little bit more kick. A good example, I have a lot of students at the moment that are learning the drop backs in Ashtanga yoga, and some, you know, maybe we expect that to be this very simple shifting of weight. In the beginning, it's not like that. We have to use a lot of controlled, explosive energy to get up and momentum. And we use that in the beginning just to get our muscle memory correct so we learn how to do movements. Once that's adapted, it will be a softer, more controlled, fluid thing. But in the beginning, you have to understand that to learn movements, sometimes we need that explosive energy to generate that force. And again, going back to Newton's laws of motion, it's just understanding the world that we're in. You need that explosiveness, and it's good for you, yeah? It's kind of fun. I like that about yoga. I like that there's some explosive movements, and it's a bit more fun, and we have to use a little bit more explosivity to generate force. Not everything is this kind of slow, fluid movement. So if you're really plateauing in your practice, you know, get into that headspace, yeah? Where you're going to need to be explosive. You're going to have to go to failure and get used to what that feels like. Going to the point where your muscles almost collapse, where you give out and you fall down. Yeah, gravity just you give way to gravity, and that resistance stops. Boom, and you fall. And then every time you do it, you'll get stronger and stronger. You'll be able to generate more force, and you'll feel lighter. I'm repeating it because it's an important thing to understand. And again, if you haven't really done any strength training before, maybe this is a little bit alien to you. So you have to generate that feeling and what it feels like. Same way stretching, you know, when we're new to yoga, we don't know what that's like. We don't know where our end range is. So we have to kind of learn that so that we get that feedback from our body so that we understand what that feels like. Cool. I think I've said enough on this now. I hope that helps. And again, if you're really struggling with the jump back and jump through, check out my jump back breakdown. I've been teaching this workshop for many years. But it's a really good tool to learn how to do the lift up and jump back, just because I know how hard it is and so many of us struggle with it. All right, ciao.